And this is sort of a kickoff meeting for the Lake Nasworthy initiative. We've actually been doing work for several months, and we wanted to present to you what we're doing, get some feedback from you this morning, and present our team why we've been asked to do the work, present our work so far, get feedback from you. We're scheduled to go, I believe, till 10, and so we'll make sure that we end diligently on time, because I know many of you probably have other obligations. And then there'll be an opportunity for you to come back to give us feedback on some more detailed work we're going to do over the next couple days. 6 o'clock tomorrow night. AJ, in this room, correct? So I really appreciate it. We have a council member here, Kendall. Do we have any other elected officials here this morning? So, and we're going to make a quick presentation, and then we've got a mic up front. This is being televised, so if you have comments or questions, it's going to be really important that you come to the microphone. How many of you, this is the very first time you've been to one of these meetings, and you for the kickoff of this initiative? Okay, well, good. Okay. Well, then what I'm going to do is give you a quick overview of what we're doing. This is the presentation that we made to the selection committee and the city council. And I'm not going to belabor the detail, but I think it's important for you to have a sense of why we're doing what we're doing and who we are, and to give you an opportunity to ask us questions about what the process is going forward. The Gateway Planning team is made up of several firms. Our firm, we're primarily a Texas-based firm, but we work in other parts of the community. And we work in places around the Sun Belt. River Studios with us, and I'll talk a little bit more about them. They're a specialist in waterfront planning. MFA, which is a group that specializes in market analysis, and in particular, Christian and Dan, who are here with us, they actually are very experienced in natural environmental tourism. They've done work, for example, for Schlitterbahn, for zoos. This is their area, and they understand what it takes to be successful. And then you see the team. This is the group of people doing the work. We're here for several days in a workshop environment, and the approach that we are taking for essentially the enhancement and preservation of the Lake Nasworthy area is to reinforce the market for local folks like yourselves. There's a lot that's already happening at the lake. The number one goal here is to not necessarily make this somebody else's lake, but to reinforce and enhance the experience first and foremost for the citizens of San Angelo. But that's complex. There are a lot of different community interests in terms of the lake. There are multiple public agencies involved. Of course, the city's taken over stewardship of the lake, but as you know, there's state and federal interest also, in addition to private interest. Ultimately, though, what our goal is to really understand how the complexity of the lake can be enhanced through a design to reinforce things that need to be reinforced, and to improve things that need to be improved. For example, on the southwest side of the lake, there's a lot of opportunity, but access and the roads down there are very challenging. But how do you design that access in a way that preserves the natural environment down there? As you know, when you put more roads in, it tends to make it feel less natural. It tends to increase the traffic. But there's already demand for more access on that side of the lake, and so with the archery activities, for example, and then of course the big events like the boat races. So that's our challenge, to help figure out a design strategy as investments are made further into the lake itself. How are we doing it in a way that is sensitive to the natural ecology of the lake, but also accommodates the human activity in a way that is safe and convenient. Ultimately, many of you and others already have an investment made in the lake and the surrounding businesses and homes. And we want to make sure that we are leaving an environment when we do our work that creates a consistent, ongoing opportunity for you to continue to feel good about any money you've invested in your home or in your businesses. Roy Mann, who's here, and Johanna Arendt with River Studio, one of the reasons we asked Roy and Johanna to join us is that Roy has been for decades working on great waterfront places. He was the person, if you've been to Oklahoma City, that was the original person that conceived of the Bricktown canals, which is a great man-made, not natural, but man-made water environment. But in Texas, there are very few water features that haven't had interventions by man, and of course, that's true of this lake. So we felt that we needed an expert that really understands how to connect the built environment with the natural environment. But the key for us is also understanding if you want to continue to have a vibrant lake, there are business aspects to it. The Chamber is promoting the region as an action sports capital. We're already hearing talk of potential tournaments, national tournaments, NCAA tournaments, say for example for archery. And in order for these ongoing activities to be successful, we've got to be able to justify investment. For example, one of the things we're hearing over and over again is there are not enough bathroom facilities and significant comfort facilities around the lake. Well, in order to justify the investment, whether it's private investment or public investment, we have to understand what the potential is for the expansion of those kinds of activities that are already working. That's why MFA is with us. And as I said, they've done, for example, over 200 waterfront amusement and recreation studies. I mean, they really are the national experts. So between Roy and where is he, Peter? Where's Peter? Hey, Peter. Peter, who I knew at the land office, Peter used to be the director of the state's coastal management program, who really understands preservation and waterfront management. And MFA and our design capacity, we put this team together to really speak directly to what we think is the balance of preserving what's working already at the lake and encouraging additional activity that makes sense consistent with local desires. There is an amazing opportunity. This is a graph that Dan prepared and Christian for an initial analysis of the market. There is incredible unmet demand for all kinds of outdoor activities. I mean, and you know that. Look at the people walking every night at Gun Club Hill. But we think there's a way to harness that demand more effectively. Cycling, more organized sports and cross-country and trails, for example. But in order to do that, you have to really understand what the market place is. So we've begun to actually look at who you are to understand how to match those demands up with the current local market and the more regional market coming from Abilene and Odessa and other places. There's also a fiduciary obligation on the part of the trust fund, on the part of the city. And there's a complex layer as more of the homes are being purchased out of the ground leases of how the neighborhoods are going to be managed. We understand, you know, that's something that we have really worked hard to understand for those of you that actually live in the neighborhoods. We've worked hard to understand the complexity of that dynamic. And then you have a tremendous shoreline, much of which hopefully will remain natural, or to the extent that it's natural after it's been modified over the years through appropriate interventions. But also, it's just incredible that, as many of you probably take for granted, we're right next to the airport. And from a tourism standpoint and from a business standpoint, that's a phenomenal opportunity. The other thing that we've looked at very carefully is what's the relationship of the lake to the greater San Angelo community. And of course, the Air Force and Angelo State have facilities on the lake. But even if they didn't, we believe that making sure that whatever we do is a continued partnering opportunity with those very important public institutions in the community is one of our objectives. And we've been meeting with the representatives of those institutions and organizations. But ultimately, our job is to really facilitate a program that is knitted together for the lake. What we did not realize that's really impressive to us is how much is really already going on at the lake. And what we want to do is to make sure that we help you all not continue to believe that it's got to be an either or, that it's a lake for the neighborhoods or it's a lake for the broader community, and those two are not necessarily consistent. I think they absolutely are, and why am I saying that? Because it's already a lake for the broader community in terms of the myriad of activities that are already underway on a regular basis, formal annual events, and all sorts of things that are already happening, the wakeboarding, the archery, the natural, the camping. And so we think that actually it's already happening, the consistency of the lake being a neighborhood, but also being a greater asset for the local and regional community. We also know, though, that there are things that we have to help resolve. So, for example, the lack of capacity for recreational walking, running, and cycling. There's no question, I don't think it takes a consultant team to conclude that that is something that needs to be resolved. What we're going to do is to try and actually figure out how to resolve that in coordination with the Parks Department and the Parks Plan that was recently adopted. What are the linkages both around the lake and into the different areas of the lake, but also we believe there's a need for a strong linkage back towards this part of the city. And then there are challenges. One person's eyesore is another person's business. And what we want to make sure we're not doing is being perceived to coming in and trying to put anybody out of business. And we want to make sure that if there are private interests at play, that it's their choice as to whether or not to modify or make further investments in their asset. We think it's our job to create a strong vision and effectively a business plan for the lake, both for the private sector and the public sector. But it's not our job to say that, for example, a storage facility is an underutilized property. It's for the owner to say that. It's for the owner to say, is it my option to give up the cash flow from the storage facility to use that piece of property in a way that might be more profitable to me and better for the broader interest around the lake. But hopefully we can create options so that those of you that have ownership in property can actually make informed decisions. And then ultimately, the question of design itself. We do think that there's a need for some additional design of the fabric of the lake itself. The relationship of the neighborhoods to the undeveloped areas, to the activity areas. And I think that our goal is to make sure that we reinforce the authenticity of San Angelo. To us, that is as important as anything. Our goal here is not to bring in some Disney concept or some other planner's idea from another lake that was what we thought was right for that location. We really want to build on what's already there. The goal here is not to reinvent Lake Nasworthy, but to build on what's already in place. And just to show you that we do understand large, complex areas that have neighborhood interest and natural interest and institutional interest. Our team gave birth to the new Texas A&M San Antonio and the new Verano community on the south side of San Antonio. And doing that from scratch, those kinds of projects, for example, gives us the ability to really understand how to marry the natural environment, the institutional environment, and the neighborhood environment. Now, for those of you that care, our scope has a lot of detail, but to boil it down, excuse me, for the first several months, we've done an extensive amount of analysis. You can see the maps. I don't know if you can tell over here on the wall, but if you were up over here looking, this map of the lake has maybe over 100 different notations. That represents notes we've taken in interviews of, I don't know, Peter, Anna, would you say 20 people, 30 people, many of whom have a business interest or institutional interest or neighborhood interest around the lake. If any of you want to meet one-on-one, we're happy to do that. But also this morning is an opportunity for you to provide your questions and comments. We're now in the process of doing a workshop to build on that information to take our professional understanding, our market understanding, what's already happening on the ground, and the vision that we continue to hear from people in terms of what you would like to see from the lake. I know this slide shows a lot of detail, but part of our delivery is to give you back some real useful tools. So, for example, we're developing now, this is, we'll talk about that in a sec, this Lake Nasworthy framework, but that's just the starting point. We're really at the beginning of the heavy lifting. And we're going to develop, for example, detailed potential plans for the Mary Lee Park area and other parts of the lake to begin to figure out what the possibilities are. I'm not going to go through all the details, but just to say that by the end, what we will develop, you can see in this in the brown, is effectively a year-round, 7-day-a-week activity program driven by the options that we've received in our work with you and the community, and the market analysis, and the parks plan that's already been adopted. We really believe that this is a very important initiative. We're honored to be a part of it. This is a unique and rare asset. I think many of you know that. I think you're proud of Lake Nasworthy. It really is a differentiator for this community in West Texas. And what I'd like to do before we move on to showing you some of the initial work we've done and get your feedback is to answer any initial questions that you might have about why we're here and what we're doing.
Your presentation.
Would you mind speaking into the microphone? Sorry about that. It's just, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Sorry about that. It's just.
Thank you. One of the issues that as you're going through the presentation, looks like it's right on task. Have you looked at the funding sources? And when you talked about your one-on-one, have you met with the Lake Board out at Lake Nasworthy to provide them some sort of preliminary?
I think we met with some representatives. We will look at funding issues, but it's premature. Before we look at funding issues, we want to develop a framework and a vision and some detailed recommendations. But part of our engagement is exactly that. We are going to be looking at implementation and funding issues, and we look forward to getting feedback. And we know that one of the questions is, for example, what's the role of the trust fund? What's the role of the city? And that's absolutely something that we're going to be taking a look at. It's just we haven't developed enough specific detail yet in terms of what potentially would be a priority for any kind of investment at this stage, but that will be part of our work. And you all will have an opportunity to give us feedback once we make some recommendations on that. Yes, we have met with representatives of the Lake Board. Any other questions? Okay, well, let me just briefly walk you through what we've done. And Dan, maybe I can have you go over to the wall here while I'm doing this. Here you go. What we have. Oh. Did I turn it off? Is it on? Nope. It's on now.
Nope.
Okay. What we have here is, you can see this, did I break it?
Just to hit the remote. Yeah, just don't hit the button on the end and you're good. Right.
Okay. Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay. So what we have here is, after a couple of months of analysis and meeting with folks one-on-one, and again, the purpose was not to exclude anybody. So afterwards, if anybody's interested in having a one-on-one meeting, we'd be happy to do that. But the bottom line is, what we've begun to do is identify different character zones of the lake. And you can see we've identified 5. And you can see on the wall over here to my left, you've got some detail about the potential program that could be built upon in terms of those different zones and what's already happening. So, for example, we've identified on the southwest side of the lake an area that we're calling the Action Sports Zone. It's already that. There's boat races, there's a lot of activity that is already taking place there. We think, though, that in order for that to continue to be successful, it has to be a good neighbor. And I know there's some challenges already out there in terms of concerns about noise. So one of the things we've done is we've identified in the green area above and below it, you can see what we're calling the nature education zone. One of the things we're recommending is moving the nature center from Mary Lee Park down into this area in the south area next to the BLM property, because we think that that's a real obvious location to expand the nature center. There's talk of other kinds of natural activities, trails, equestrian trails. We believe this would be a great addition to this area that's already very natural and would be a great bookend or buffer to what's been emerging as this action sports area. Similarly to the north, where you've got the archery activity and the disc golf and those sorts of things, we believe that if we can help design the infrastructure and help manage and going forward additional capacity for this west side of the lake in an orderly way, there will be a good complement. But we view this as an active side of the lake. On the east side of the lake, in the blue, you can see we're calling it the community activity zone. There's the defunct hatchery. We talked about that would be a good candidate for improvement for enhanced birding. You already have a significant demand for birding tourism here. We think really focusing on that and enhancing it. At the Angelo State site, it might be a good candidate for a sailing school. There's a lot of lower impact activities that would probably make sense over there. Here in the red at Mary Lee Park, we're calling that the Harbor Village. It could have a different name for lack of a better name right now, but we really see that as an opportunity to bring the marina back, potentially a hotel, restaurants, really enhancing the beach. Marinas economically on their own in today's environment are very, very difficult to maintain because they typically have to be subsidized, as you know, unless they're in a location such as Miami or Long Beach or the lake, the lakefront in Chicago, where there's continuous demand. But if it's nestled in with more profitable businesses, we think, especially the timing for a hotel for the lake is perfect. Why do I say that? Specifically because for those of us that are coming into town, the notion that you're paying more than $200 a night for a hotel room says that there's demand for more hotel space. Christian and Dan did an analysis. Occupancy rates for hotels have gone in just 2 years from about 50% to over 70%. And in the business world, that's a huge jump. What we want to make sure is that as the demand for rooms driven by the shale play wanes, that we have a more organized market that can take advantage of new hotels that are designed not just for the near-term demand, but that could be great amenities for the lake, for business people, for tourists, and for regional activities. So that as we can build the market for demand around the lake, we take advantage of the current demand for hotels. This is a personal opinion, but I think it would be a tragedy if you had several hotels built today just to meet the shale demand, and those hotels were not thought in terms of what will they be like in 10 years? What will they be like in 15 years? So we see this as a real opportunity. And then finally, in terms of Gun Club Hill and the defunct power plant, we're going to take a stab at really trying to conceive of what both of those properties could be together that really nestle around the KOA campground. I know there's been a lot of discussion in the last year about the walking and trail traffic, but what we want to do is create a strong vision so that the neighborhoods that are there feel good about the long-term redevelopment potential of what's now currently owned by the public and what will eventually be owned by another private investor. We think there's a lot of different opportunities there, and we want to make sure that the near-term need for a better recreational environment is actually driven through a long-term vision. And so what we've done is begin to identify the current activities and what additional activities might occur in each of these locations. And you can see what that begins to do is it rationalizes and relates all the different activities around the lake that currently are very ad hoc. They're very vibrant. A lot of them are tremendously successful and growing, but there's really no management or leveraging or relationship. One of the things, for example, that we talked about is over here in the dashed green zone, the area, one of the areas we're calling the nature and education zone, is that the archery group, they want a permanent pavilion and bathroom facilities. Well, there's several other activities over there. What if we create an environment where multiple groups and activities could share in facilities? And that way those facilities could be a reality where not any one of those groups necessarily could afford to each put in their own set of facilities for each individual activity. So Dan, you might want to walk us through a little bit of what we've identified, and then we can start to get some feedback. If during this discussion about these emerging activity zones or character zones, you have a comment, please come up to the mic. And the reason you see all these different colors and the scratches is we haven't finished this process. And part of what we want to do this morning is, if you think one of the things we're talking about doesn't make sense, tell us why. If you think we're missing an opportunity, let us know, and so we can mark it down.
And thank you very much for coming this morning. We would really appreciate your input on these ideas. These literally are a wall full of trial balloons, even though it doesn't look like there's a lot of helium here. And I think it would be very helpful for us and for you eventually if you identify some of these that might be really great ideas, or if there are ideas for these individual areas that we've missed, or if any of them are barking dogs that we should stop considering. As Scott said, you know, please come up to the microphone and give us some input as to what you think of these ideas and whether or not and why you think that way about these ideas. This is obviously, as Scott pointed out, is in various colors of markers, which is kind of a, you know, the way it was put up by individual people. But think of it, as I read them off, as being in pencil. In other words, they're still very erasable, and there are things that we can add to these at this point. The first area that I'm going to talk about is the area that, if Scott, if you wouldn't mind pointing to the action sports area. In that area, we sort of see the magnet, and let me stop for a second and say that we classify, we have a way of looking at each of these areas as each of them having a magnet that draws people to them. What's the principal reason people would go there? And then the second is linger longer. What else do they do after they've been there for the magnet? Because we'd like to keep lengths of stay as long as possible, given that the longer people stay, the more money they leave behind, and the more justification they may have to stay overnight.
Can I interrupt you? That's
Sure.
Dan's Chicago way of saying linger longer, saying hang out.
Yeah. Hey. And then we also have a kind of a key thing that really must be paid attention to in order to pull this off, to make it successful. So in the action sports area, the magnet in our mind is the event area. That is where the events are taking place on the water. The linger longer is cross participation, that people would engage in other things while they're in the area. And the keys are to have numerous events and event management, facility improvements, and I think also to be sure, as Scott pointed out, that the noise and things like that are contained in a way that they're not an annoyance or a nuisance to anyone else at the lake. Right now we have the event venue, as we're calling it, which is the kind of area where the boat races take place and such. And we actually look on that as, and this is going to be a bit of a reach, as a kind of a convention center. It's an event facility, so we need to serve the event facility or the convention center. It is a programmable space. You could be running drag boats there one weekend, and you could be running remote control boats there the following weekend. So there's a whole variety of different kinds of uses. But also in that area, we're putting, or we're suggesting, I should say, wakeboarding, mountain biking, possibly paintballing, boat ramp improvements, off-road, motocross, possibly BMX, possibly a camping area, an additional one, possibly music venue, and possibly a cross-country running course. Now you're going to hear some of these ideas repeated over a couple of different areas because we haven't settled on where some of these might best go. We have to think about that. So that's the action sports area. The second area is the Harbor Village area, which is essentially Mary Lee Park. Is that correct? Is Mary Lee Park? And the magnet there is the waterfront mixed-use development that we're talking about for that area. The linger longer, the reason why people would stay is basically the synergy of uses. People want to go there and maybe go dine and go for a walk along the water or something like that afterwards, or maybe they'll want to go do a little shopping if there's a few shops there. The linger longer is or as I say, synergy, but the keys to us are re-envisioning the area as a family-friendly, diverse set of uses along Knickerbocker there. And the program that we're talking about, and this is an example of something that shows up a couple of places, it would include a sailing school, the triathlon would pass through here, windsurfing, kayaking, canoeing, parasports, destination playground, some kind of a gateway arch to let people know that there's an icon that says you are here, a music venue, the point there being that it would have to be low noise because it's right across the lake from Gun Club Hill and the housing over there. Possibly a splash pad, a water park maybe, some water park features, possibly doing an LED light show on Knickerbocker Bridge, on the bridge that goes across the lake so that you would see it from the beach there. A destination hotel, and as somebody that's done 100 or more hotel studies, I can say Scott's notion about financing this in the moment, because this is when some money is sloshing around town looking for hotel projects, is a really very, very astute idea. An excursion boat, fishing off of docks, possibly some food trailers, the marina, which Scott also mentioned, and is a great thing to have, but marinas don't make money. Possibly some housing across the way where there already is some housing, restaurant concessions, let's see, shops, the beach itself, and a boardwalk. Now, before I leave this area, any comments on either of these first two areas that I've outlined some of the things we're considering for these areas? And I have to apologize and say, got to use the mic. So.
We really would appreciate your feedback.
Yeah.
By the way, this is
I'm 40% of the way through and I've heard nothing. This isn't helping.
And let me also say, this is a list of things that are already happening now, or are we think could happen based on what we already have been hearing from folks. Morning, Paul. And we think that we're going to actually narrow down our recommendations because you can't do everything. We want to make sure that they're related, that they're consistent with not just the neighborhoods, but actually, as you know, there's a science to clustering different activities. You know, malls, or whatever you want to think about a mall, malls are very successful because where the anchors are located and where the inline shops are aligned and how they're juxtaposed with one another creates more consistent long-term success. And so what we don't want to do is just say, well, didn't it sound great to have parasailing over there? Well, that might be a real conflict with the marina, for example. So, you know, these are ideas that we've learned from you and from our own kind of visioning. But once we start to move into the more detailed planning of each of these areas, we're going to narrow down our recommendations of what you might want to encourage or not.
And so, some of it, just a second, Paul, when you mentioned the conflict point, one thing that came up last night too was the possible conflict of parasailing and the fact that we're at the end of the runway right there too. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you know, we talked about this in the meeting, but I'm seeing that Goodfellow Rec Camp is connected in. I can see that across the street from Knickerbocker's connected in at Mary Lee Park. I said, how are you going to do that? Because I just don't see a pedestrian crossing a 55-mile-per-hour zone. And you guys had some ideas.
Sure.
And I think that everybody here should hear those ideas and start letting that, I call it cocoon, meaning you look at it and you go, and you think about it for a while, and good ideas come from that later. But y'all have some ideas. Will you explain that to us?
Sure. No, I think that's a good question. This is a state roadway, as you know, and that means that ultimately TxDOT has the say over any redesign or reconstruction of that roadway. We think that the opportunity is to, when we complete our work with you, is to sit down with the leadership in the district and area office of TxDOT and discuss with them the potential reconfiguration of that roadway so that you maintain the traffic flow that's necessary, but also potentially make it a safer environment in terms of the street serving a destination also. You know, as you all know, and just think about streets that you drive on regularly, oftentimes they're either really designed to move traffic effectively or they're designed to accommodate what's around them, and oftentimes they don't do a good job of both. We think that Knickerbocker could actually be potentially redesigned so that it can carry a lot of traffic, but that it would be friendly to cross. I chaired a committee that the TxDOT, the State Transportation Commission appointed. I was the outside chair along with Mark Merrick, who's the head of the design division for TxDOT, and we developed a policy for the design of roadways, state roadways in urban areas. And the lake is not per se urban, but we think the activity at that location, the lake really is more like a neighborhood environment than it is a rural environment. And we think based on the criteria that the state has adopted, that our committee recommended and that the TxDOT Transportation Commission agreed should be put into the TxDOT standards, would be a good candidate to be utilized for this location. We actually did that for Padre Boulevard and Padre Island, Park Road 100. Now, the money hasn't been identified yet, but we actually worked with TxDOT and secured their commitment for redesign of Padre Boulevard. How many of you have tried to walk across Padre Boulevard in South Padre before? 5 lanes, chicken lane, dangerous, crazy, right? It doesn't fit the needs 360 out of 365 days a year. Yep, on Easter weekend and July 4th, that works, but for all the other days it doesn't. TxDOT has agreed to a little bit narrower lane. They've agreed to color differentiated bike lanes, and they've agreed to parking, literally, in their right-of-way on Padre Boulevard, because we were able to work with them and the engineers to establish a design that works both for continuing to move traffic, but to make it a safer environment for those businesses and restaurants and vacationers up and down the boulevard. We think Knickerbocker is a good candidate for exactly that kind of discussion. As long as we establish for TxDOT that we're maintaining the safety and traffic flow, I think they would be open to that discussion.
There's another dimension to that too, and that's where you deploy some of these potential assets that we're talking about. It could be on the other side of the highway is where the housing is and where the hotel is, but the hotel, the restaurants and the other things that one would go to on a given visit were all together on the west side.
Yeah, I'm addressing what Paul was saying a moment ago about how the traffic can be handled, because obviously that is a problem. We can't slow that down to 20 mile an hour like a school zone. So
Sure.
But you know, that can be, as you said, Padre Island's a good example. Lakeway is a pretty good example, although on one side Lakeway's a zoo, and on the other side they've managed to handle it better to where they get the people off of the highway, and where it can be handled in big parking lots or other zones with slowing it down for retail and all that sort of thing. So I can see that as being a problem, but very addressable. So
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have a solution, and we're not suggesting one. We just know that we think TxDOT would be open to a discussion, and it would be a partnership opportunity. We're not suggesting that anything be done to Knickerbocker yet, but we do believe that at some point, as we're talking about a reinvention of that location and a discussion about the bridge as a gateway, and there are only so many things you can do with a bridge, and we're not suggesting any major reinvention of it. It'd be very expensive. But we are very mindful that the capacity issue still needs to be addressed, and we're not suggesting to eliminate lanes. You're right, turning it into a school zone type environment wouldn't be appropriate either.
And we've already done some editing. For example, one of the ideas early on was to look at the bridge as something like the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, where it's lined with shops and things like that. And we realized that would spend every dollar in the budget for years to come. So, fun idea, not likely at all.
And I can tell you what TxDOT would say about that.
Yeah.
Any other, before we move on,
Please.
Yes.
Talking about the Mary Lee Park area, I'm sorry, about the Mary Lee Park area.
Yes.
The proposal for the shops and all that kind of stuff, are you looking at and everything that's like where the Concho, I guess what I'm trying to say is that area where the beach is, are you looking across the street or both places?
Well, both locations.
So-
We're not looking to replace the beach. We're looking to enhance it, to take advantage of it, and to reinforce what's already happening there. You've got, of course, the boat company, the excursion boat company, and the beach and the marina. whatever we would look at, and we're going to get into some of those details over the next couple of days and present some options to you tomorrow night, we would absolutely be embracing the marina, embracing the beach, embracing the excursion boat business.
So what about the homes that are right through there, that little strip of homes on Joy Road?
Yeah, no, we're very sensitive and aware of those homes, and we need to figure out how to make sure that the relationship of any redevelopment of the Mary Lee Park area is also consistent with those homes.
And also about the, right on the other side of where the little boat ramp is? Is that part of, do they consider that part of Mary Lee Park?
Well, no, this
No.
is a larger area, though. The point is the reason we included the Air Force facility and the property on the other side of the street is it really needs to be looked at as one location, even though it has different ownership and it's split by the road and there are neighborhoods on both sides of the streets. We believe the only way for there to be any kind of meaningful redevelopment there, it has to be viewed as one organism, for lack of a better way to describe it, which includes the neighborhoods. We didn't draw the neighborhoods in, but as you can see in yellow, throughout our analysis, we've identified the neighborhoods. One of the things that we have a lot of experience in is actually working in redevelopment context. We do a lot of downtown redevelopment, which is always very sensitive because you already have existing neighbors in and around downtowns. And honestly, I don't see this as any different than bringing in redevelopment into a downtown where you have an adjacent neighborhood. You have to do it in a way that makes it an amenity for the neighborhood and not a conflict.
This is also a part of, the housing is actually part of our potential mix of things for this area, where we're looking at possibly using housing as a buffer against existing housing or near existing housing to keep more active uses away. And this, as we're talking about hotels as being developed at this time in the community because of the shale boom, in that same sense, there's going to be a lot more housing built here. So the hope is that we can get some more higher quality than is typical housing built than is in a shale situation, and that it too would remain after the boom, and it would be a new form of housing that would be appealing to people so they could live out near the lake as well. And to that end, I'm currently working in Hobbs, New Mexico, my colleagues and I, and that's the other end of the Permian Basin. And we've seen the wave of development that's hit there, and so we're very mindful of what the rock shale development, or the gas development will have for this area, what implications it will have, and we're hoping to use that wave of investment to the advantage of the community in terms of community objectives in housing and hotel development for starters. Any other comments on these first two areas, action sports or harbor? The next area is actually a split area. It is the north nature area and the south nature area. The south nature area and the north nature area is kind of less native and or less nature and more active sports. And to make the south one work, we'll start with the south. We're looking at a magnet as a nature center and possibly a family entertainment center. And that would also, in terms of linger longer uses, would be the adjacent uses, and the key to success would be the facility integration and operation, because the nature center and the family entertainment center and possibly heritage interpretive center at that same site would want those to operate as closely together as they could, so that people would just pass from one to the other on a single visit fairly easily, so that they could draw more people, because the longer the length of stay is, the greater the distance people will drive to come to something. Other parts in that southern area would be an equestrian trail, possibly an equestrian center, the family entertainment center I mentioned, a heritage center, and a heritage interpretive center, a nature center, and possibly a kind of a mini zoo that would be an expansion of the current holdings of the nature center. I don't think we're talking lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. I think we're just talking more about native species, local flora and fauna. In terms of the north area already has disc golf and the archery that Scott mentioned earlier. Excuse me. To those we would add possibly mountain biking and that sort of package of services that would include parking, restrooms, and pavilion for people using that area. For example, there's been an interest and a demand for birthday parties at the archery range, but there's really not a good covered area to have them, and you don't really have good restroom facilities out there. And that area would also include possibly off-road motorized sports activities in that area as well. So that's that area. Any thoughts on the north and south areas there? Comments on what I've just talked about?
This is a pretty significant suggestion. I mean, we really would like to hear your feedback. This is, talking about moving the nature center, talking about taking advantage of it in a different way. Yes, ma'am.
I'm coming, I guess, from the mountain biking triathlon side of things. And this year we recently started the high school mountain bike team, which is something that's brand new coming to Texas. They started the league last year. And it's something that's grown over 50% within the year. It originally started in California 10 years ago. We have high school students coming out by the thousands over there. They've had to split the leagues and really searching for venues for races. It's a wonderful opportunity to get kids off the street, keep them out of trouble, and it gets them back into nature, which is something hard these days in the technological world, getting kids going. So really pushing for a mountain bike.
One of the approaches that we've used with mountain biking lately is to go with a single track approach, and try to differentiate the mountain biking path from equestrian, running, or any of the other paths.
Excellent.
The only thing we would presume that might also go on the mountain biking track would be trail running, and that would be it. Any thoughts on what would be an ideal mountain biking path for your high school age population?
The single track is what we do, and it preserves the area as far as nature and things like that. So
What would you think of for length?
for length,
Yeah, how long?
our races run. We like 9-mile laps is what we've been doing. So
So when you look at the map next to Scott there, what would be ideal for you would be something that would weave back and forth, so you
Right.
capture your whole length as much as possible in a constrained area, so you could also monitor the kids and be sure everything was going well on the path.
One of the things also is I'm a mountain biker, and I've recently started riding, I was down in Austin, but started riding in the Dallas area, the Dallas Off-Road Bike Association, DORB. I don't know if you're
Yes,
coordinating with them. On the South Dallas side, there's a beautiful, near Oak Cliff, which actually is a cliff. It's an escarpment. It's gorgeous. The local preservation group, I don't even know what the organization is, they've actually created a preservation area where they've identified the different plant species, and they've coordinated with the mountain biking group, because a lot of people believe that mountain biking can be destructive, but I think most mountain bikers
No,
are actually
we-
very
we-
sensitive.
we
right?
take care of our environment.
Absolutely. And so I think this could be an opportunity for a partnership between the mountain biking community and the natural and ecological community for improvements to that location of the lake, where you could actually have a nature trail, and at the same time, it could be an active recreation area.
yes, mountain biking is a big push for conservation, cleanliness, awareness. We're not like BMX type stuff, destroying things. We want to take care of our area.
And actually, to the point for those that are not mountain bikers, when we're talking about a track, that actually sort of epitomizes the notion that they're not out to just randomly destroy the environment.
Right.
You stay on the track and you take that track. And actually, the nice thing about it is that you can time yourself, you can see how well you do in certain areas, so you can get some performance feedback. Thank you very much.
And it's something, not even just the kids. We've got, I mean, you can cycle your whole life. We've got 60, 70-year-olds out there.
Could we have Exhibit A rise again? You could cycle your whole life.
It's a lifelong sport, so.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on this, please?
I feel like I should be talking this direction, but I'll talk to the mic. On the nature center, I think if we can move that nature center, we remove the barriers to expansion. And what that means is we can add a bird section or a natural animals of West Texas section. We have bobcats now, but we can add more animals in there. And then so in 5 years after that, maybe the city council wants to add on, and we can add on. It may become a zoo someday, not now. but it's not inhibited from doing so as its own popularity proves itself. And, its costs are controlled and thought out and et cetera. So that's a good thing. The other thing I want to look at is across from the old entrance to the airport, the A in Nature Center, if you just go up that road right there, or Nature and Education, but anyway, the A, if you go up right there, I think that we could look at building a new road that injects cars into that area without taking them down Fisherman's Road. I mean, that's a residential area, and everybody has to go down this residential 2-lane road. It's not safe. It does not increase property values. I really think if we can get some of the traffic away from that area, then you have a more secluded neighborhood, maybe perhaps in trade with the Mary Lee Park being built out. And so you get a build out over here, but you get a more of a seclusion because we take away the main traffic flow from your houses. And that might work out better. But I certainly would be safer, and certainly would get them to the horseshoe area better.
One of the things, excuse me real quick, one of the things we're going to do is working with city staff, Parks Department, TxDOT. One of our final deliverables will be a proposed coordinated trail and roadway improvement plan. It's not going to be in great detail. We're not going to design the cross sections of the trails or get into the details of how we might or might not reinvent Knickerbocker. But in terms of the access, we believe that if we're going to be proposing some additional activities, it's part of our responsibility to also propose how those activities can be managed in terms of traffic, pedestrian access, and those sorts of things. We think that's the single most important aspect of the lake long-term. We think that's where the community has broad agreement in terms of that kind of recreational activity. And so we're looking forward, once we begin to put a proposal out there, for your specific feedback on the details, once we put a concept on the table, which we haven't developed yet, but we will.
And to your point about the Nature Center and Zoo, Christian and I do a fair amount of work with zoos and nature centers across the country, and recently did some work for the San Antonio Zoo. And I think the San Antonio Zoo and perhaps the Dallas or Fort Worth Zoo would be interested in working with you to help develop something, to nurture something out here. There are two kind of zoo operations in Austin, one of which is more of a rescue operation, and that is also a step that some places take or go through. They become a rescue operation first, and perhaps your nature center is already doing that function here.
You mentioned access was, one of the primary concerns. I think the number 2 concern, though, is we're talking about an asset out there. Is part of your proposal the maintenance of the lake, as far as the dredging to make sure that it's clean, that it's, the lake truly is a safe place? I know, with the water levels currently, it could be a dangerous factor for us. So do you include part of the maintenance of the lake in your proposal?
We're not going to get into the details of the maintenance issues, and I know there are different views on how to maintain water bodies, and some people have different priorities in what interventions should or shouldn't be done. We will generally identify those policy considerations. Peter is, as I said, an expert in Joanna has expressed on our team some significant concerns about the increasing activities on the lake, especially motorized activities. What's the impact going to be on the ecology? It's a drinking source, et cetera. So we're not going to be able to resolve any detail, but I think we'll be in a position to help frame up some of those questions more carefully, so that as you all are deciding what to do with those specific questions in the future, hopefully our work will help inform a better decision. But we're not specifically tasked with getting into the details of a maintenance strategy. But I agree. I think if the implication, your question or your comment is, we are talking about a very significant long-term initiative for the lake, and to not be mindful of the need for significant capacity for maintenance would be a very big piece of the story that we dropped the ball on. So we'll set the stage for further analysis, but at this point, we're not going to be able to get into any technical detail.
The next section is...
Quick
what-
question.
Oh, sorry.
And I'm sure y'all are taking into consideration the water situation. Like when you talk water parks and things, I'm thinking evaporation, and there goes the rest of our water. Keeping in line that we are a desert area and we're not, keeping in that thought process, trying to keep everything more in the natural form than trying to change it into something else.
Roy, you may want to comment, or Peter. I think the team's natural philosophical predisposition is to take advantage of the natural where it's possible.
I can't believe I got that far without somebody mentioning that about water parks. And water parks have a high degree of conservation these days.
Just don't touch the bottom.
We've all learned the lesson here. I think water parks certainly is a big question, and part of the answer is the one that you mentioned just a moment ago, namely we are a desert area here, and water conservation is of prime significance. So although we've listed it, I don't think we're going to go ahead with the idea of water parks here.
The lake's a water park.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna take issue. This is gonna be fun with Roy in this, and that is I think that if you have young children, they love water experiences. Lakes are wonderful water experiences, but if you look at some of the most successful water parks in the U.S., they are along the East Coast and the West Coast, and some of them are only 20 or 30 yards away from the water's edge, and for some reason, people just like interactive water, and they get more of it with water parks. So I think we'll be discussing that in-house. So if you have any further input into it. And the conservation issue is frankly a serious one. They're even building a water park in Las Vegas now, and God knows that's a desert city too. So there are plenty of situations where they've had to build water parks and essentially clean the water and return the water to use. So it's not inherently anti-conservation if you do it right. So that might be part of the restriction that's applied to the potential of one here.
Okay.
Let's see, special opportunity areas. That's what we're calling the Gun Club Hill and the power plant redevelopment. And the vertical aspect of that is probably the coolest feature there. There aren't many high areas around this lake that we can do much with. Some one of us must have been to Italy in the past 6 months because in addition to the Ponte Vecchio, people were also talking about the idea of a kind of a Tuscan hill village on top of their housing development, which sounds wonderful and romantic and like a great resort. But in the end, I think we're kind of leaning towards, at least for now, something that makes that area more broadly available to the general public, but turns the focus away from the housing on what would be that side, and something that works off of the top of the hill focuses more on the other side, focusing down into the valley toward the old power plant, principally for reasons of not being a nuisance to the people, the homeowners along the western rim on the lake. Some of the things we're talking about over there, and there's really quite a list here, so follow this please and tell us what you think. The triathlon would pass through there. Again, mountain biking seems to be a potential idea there. A destination hotel on the old site of the power plant, a heritage interpretive center that would be woven into it, perhaps a party boat that would come up out of one of the sluiceways, camping, fishing, birding, and art development, music venue perhaps behind the hill, and this one's gonna get you thinking, downhill skiing. Now, lest I have to move quickly toward the door, let me offer as an explanation. If anyone has seen the artificial turf that they use on a lot of soccer fields nowadays, they've begun to use a version of that artificial turf on hillsides. And you can go snowboarding down that surface. And it's a lot of fun. And there's some great videos online of how they do that at Liberty University out on the East Coast in Virginia. And essentially they have this surface that's on the side of the hill, and kids and adults go snowboarding or sledding or various things on that surface all day. It'd be very unique, and it would be possible here. It's a bit of an outlier, but something to think about. Destination playground, a dog park, zip lines are another natural use of the height, boat ramp improvements, and splash pad and water park come up again. Housing more in the old area where the power plant was, and restaurants and concessions. So there's talk of building kind of an attraction package of recreation on the east side, and then something that's more along the idea of housing or a resort on the old power plant site. Any thoughts?
I guess I'm coming more from the natural side again. Been in San Angelo for about 10 years, a lot of ranchers, a lot of farming, a lot of sheep. So a lot of the education and entertainment opportunities that I try and pass on to my son is within the natural realm: fishing, camping, things like that, mountain biking, things that preserve nature that I think as a country we're kind of falling away from. So more of the natural things is what I'm leaning towards, and mountain biking, you know, things like that. The snowboarding and things, you're talking about mowing down our natural environment and putting this artificial turf up, and that just...
That's a great perspective.
Yeah, and same thing with the water parks and things. I mean, water's great and fine, but enjoy it in its, you know, the lake, you know, make the beach area safer, things like that. Surfing, I did a lot of windsurfing before my son. I haven't had time because I'm a single mother now, but I still have my windsurfers up. I don't like doing it on the main lake, specifically because the speedboats scare me. So usually I wind up going to one of the outer lakes when I did go. So sailing, I think, is a wonderful thing, uses the wind. It's a natural, you know, you don't have the oil, the gas, things like that. It preserves what we have, and I just want to make sure that that stays kind of the head of any planning that you do, that you preserve our natural environment, preserve our water. So anything that's more human or human-power driven, I'm all for, and not mowing down our cactuses and things like that. I know they're kind of an eyesore. I'm kind of attached to them.
You might say you're stuck on the mic.
And I understand what you're saying. I'm Jenny with the Convention and Visitors Bureau. I bring groups, conventions, reunions in town, and one of the things that we have a big issue with is we don't have a lot for kids to do. So these issues that they're bringing up are the opportunities that we're bringing up for parks and places for these kids to go. Again, yes, nature is great, but the opportunities for more things for kids to do or families to do together, I think is great. So, right.
And it preserves the natural.
In the 3 minutes we talked about water, we lost 10,000 gallons, just like that. I'm telling you, we have water losses everywhere. We've got to get our stuff together first. We have big losses. So we have things we can work on with water and make big differences. But I want to go to the walking trail. Can you describe more?
Well, if you can see, let me steal that for 1 second. What we've done is, you can see the dashed green line here around, and then the solid line. We have begun to look at the proposed trail system in the parks plan for continuous connections and relationships from each portion of the lake, and then of course connections from the lake to town. And we're going to, as we get into some more detailed planning of each of these different locations, we're going to look at access within each of these areas, and then we're going to create a layer ultimately of a proposed master network for people walking, cycling, driving, whatever other mode, but basically a people moving system, and given whatever choice you might make in terms of how you're going to get around. So
Okay.
it's a level of detail that we're going to take as far as we can.
Okay.
One of the challenges will be, candidly, there's going to be some concern about private property interest, access, easements, those sorts of things. So one of the things we're going to have to do is be very careful to qualify our proposals because the details of access points may need to be negotiated and worked out with property owners. We want to make sure that what we're doing is not suggesting that there's any kind of imposition on property rights or anything like that. And to make sure that, as you pointed out earlier, we're not encouraging an unintended consequence on neighborhoods where there's other options for traffic flow. So we're not going to be engineering that concept, but we are going to try and put it on the table so that it becomes a starting point for that discussion.
Okay. So I guess what I'm hearing is that, what I didn't say in the beginning is Gun Club Hill is a natural attraction for walkers. And so literally thousands of walkers each year go out there, and this is individuals, not one guy going 100 times and his friend goes 100 times and there's 10 of them, it's 1,000. I'm saying there's thousands of people that go out there, and they like it because it goes up and down, it's hilly, the view changes as they go around in a circle, but there's about 12 blind corners on it. There's pedestrian, vehicular interference, conflicts is what we call it, and sometimes there's really conflicts between humans over it. So it's not necessarily safe, or it's not appealing to the neighborhood for sure, but it's a natural attraction. And I like to say, and when I design, I say, well, there's something going on there. Can we take that and rework it to where we're redirecting what's good and making it better to attract more people, but somewhere else? And so what I'm wondering is, how are you redirecting people from Gun Club Road to somewhere else? Now, I like the idea of dispersing walking trails everywhere because there's redirection. They have more options. They don't have to walk the same old trail every time, even though it's pretty darn good. They
Sure.
can walk other trails in different combinations.
If you can see this very solid purple circle here, we have identified what we think might be a related trail system that could be improved and to take advantage of the city's facility where there could be an appropriate parking location. We don't think that'll totally resolve the attraction of Gun Club Hill, but we think you have to do both. We think you need to create somewhere in the area a much more convenient and attractive place for those that come out for their evening walk. But we do believe that at some point there has to be a way to discourage the kind of ad hoc walking on the road around Gun Club Hill through improvements on Gun Club Hill that would be an alternative maybe on the north side, the northeast side.
And have you included on top of the hill as an option?
Absolutely. Here's the challenge as we see it. If all the discussion is solving the current problem for people who people believe could be walking anywhere, we think that there's going to continue to be varying opinions on whether or not public resources should be spent to resolve that problem. But if improvements in this area are part of a broader vision and taking advantage of this area in terms of potential organized activities and things that would not only improve the relationship with the neighborhood, reduce those conflicts, but make the location a more appealing recreational location, then the discussion about whether or not there should be public investment in that is a different conversation.
It's the hills that they're after on that, and they want the.
Sure, sure.
In our original presentation that Scott went through before, one of the things that you would have seen is that the number one activity for people, recreational activity for people in the U.S. is exercise walking. And demand and participation and annual number of times they do it on average continues to rise. And one of the reasons it is so popular, for one thing, is that doctors keep telling us to do it. My doctor does every time, but it's good for us. But the other thing is that it is so far ahead of number two, which is typically swimming. I'm not sure if it is in our particular demographic mix here, but walking is such an important thing. In really what the Gun Club Hill situation tells us is a couple of things. One is it tells us that people want to do this. They really want to do this, and that they are demonstrating with their feet. The second thing it tells us is that people want to walk in interesting places. That's where the hills come into place. That's where the blind corners are actually kind of fun because you have a constantly changing aspect in front of you. The other reason that's good is that it has a bit of a sense of protection to it also. because you're passing through residential areas, and people who want to be able to walk in safe areas want to believe that there's sort of eyes on the road too, that there's others doing it. And there's also safety in numbers. So in fact, more people will draw more people. So there's a number of factors to analyze out of that particular situation. But if you look at the road system, the trail system that we're talking about, we haven't really scoped it out there, because what you're seeing are the individual areas more than the linkages that are between them, or even the trails within them. But we've talked in the last day or two about the importance of doing separation between people on bikes and people on foot, and people on foot and runners and things like that. So our hope is not necessarily to lay out in conflict with the parks plan, but work with the parks plan that you just adopted and add to it, and talk about a way to not only bring people to great walking experiences within the lake area, but also we would suggest maybe even linking, and this is a suggestion, it's beyond our scope, the lake area to the rest of the community with walking paths. We talked for a number probably for half an hour yesterday about, hey, can we link downtown along the Concho River to the lake? And that's where Scott's point about rights of way got into the question too, because we're not sure we can do that. But we do suggest that that's something to think about in the future. So there's a wonderful, your question's a great question, because it really addresses the most engaged in recreational activity for Americans and people in San Angelo today, and that is exercise walking.
And part of my, as a councilman, part of my job is to look after the residents that are there and the walkers that are there, serve both their interests, and make sure we're paying attention to this. And I'll say, just overall, this is why we hired you. You have the experience, you come in with answers. I would hate to think that we could reinvent the wheel during the Klein Shell boom and do anywhere as close as good as you guys can do. We are busy. AJ's not in here, but we are busy. So our planners can't do this for a lot of reasons. I appreciate y'all coming in and helping us.
The last area, did we do this one yet? The community area is the area over there that Vanna is showing to us right now. Thank you. And the magna for that area is, in fact, that not much goes on there. It's in natural settings, the activities that are there. The linger longers, well, we're not really looking for people to linger longer as much as go and engage in bird watching or other things for a lengthy period of time. And the key to its success is keeping it calm, is keeping the area hospitable for the natural environment that's already there, that we would like to see continue as beautiful as it is. Activities that we've talked about for theirs are a sailing school, triathlon I think may pass through there, windsurfing possibly, a birding center, kayaking and canoeing, cycling, fishing, possibly camping, boat ramp improvements, and there's already a Boy Scout camp over there, so encourage youth activities in the area to bring kids in greater contact with nature in that area of the lake, which we think is probably the most natural area and likely to remain so. Any thoughts, comments?
How many of you are surprised at how much activity is already going on at the lake that you weren't aware of? I'm sure some of you were aware, but it's pretty amazing to us how much is already happening. The point is, we don't have to contrive opportunity. It's already there. I think our job is to help figure out how to weave it together. Anybody who hasn't spoken, just general comments or ideas? I mean, we are going to come back together tomorrow night at 6 o'clock and provide you some of our thoughts in a more detailed way. We're gonna work hard over the next 48 hours to provide some answers to some of the points you've made today.
If you want to raise your hand, I can bring a mic to you. Okay.
I'd just like to comment in what Trinidad had said. All of these ideas are great. All of this is good stuff, but if we don't clean the lake up as a basic idea and an ongoing idea, I think we've got a problem. You know, the city spent $10.2 million taking out 3.5 million yards of dirt. We should have taken out 6 million yards of dirt. Now, if we try to do that, it's going to cost us 20 million bucks. But I think in all of this master plan, there needs to be an ongoing idea of maintenance of Lake Nasworthy, and that would include a place for people to water ski, a ski course, a jet ski course. We need to have riprap put in places along the rivers where our trees are falling in the river. And I don't think it's the kind of situation where you bring in a big dredging contractor and you do it. I see it more as an ongoing maintenance of the lake and the asset that we have, and putting rocks where it belongs. And I just really think we need to be working as a goal to get the lake clean, get the lake where when you take off you don't leave a red trail behind your boat, and all these other things. The international water ski competition, it would come here. It's been looked at coming here before, but it's really right now we couldn't handle it. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff you guys probably haven't seen that happens in July. The association puts on a fireworks show that's probably 25,000, 30,000 people see it. The city doesn't pay one dime to get that done. It's done by the lake residents. We have poker run out there. We have a patriotic boat parade out there. We have a lot of activities that go on that are not public paid for items. They're private people that put it together that just enjoy the lake. But I do think the major thing you need to keep is in this whole thing is to keep the lake cleaned up and get it cleaned up.
Yes, sir. Well, it's not directly in our scope, but we will actually make a commitment to provide some analysis for you, because we definitely want to take advantage of Mr. Ravella here, Peter Ravella, who was the director of the Coastal Management Program at the time when the state of Texas was struggling, not just as a domestic issue, but an international issue, in terms of how do you preserve the body of water that is impacted by what's happening in Mexico and what's happening in the Atlantic. So I don't know if we're going to be able to come up with some ready solutions, but I think it's going to be important for us to underscore that. And even though that's not in our scope, we'll add something into our final report to make sure we frame up some of the options, because it's one of those big ticket items that some people say, well, there's, just go do it. And I know that there are unintended consequences by committing that level of resource. And we've heard this already. This is not the first time that this has been brought to our attention. I would say you're probably the fifth or sixth person that's brought it up. And we understand that if you don't take care of the asset, all the other great ideas in the world are meaningless.
And I'll just follow up on Rick Abbott. That was Rick Abbott you heard from. Both. We need that plan, and we need their plan, and we need our group talking to their group. But what I see here is we need our water director in here, and we need Clinton Bailey before he takes off. He's got 5 more days. We need him his last input on this. Our next engineers, they need to be here working with this group, talking about these things. But this group, it's out of their scope, but this is the time to talk about it. And our staff should probably be on that, working with your staff to come up with general concepts, not engineered concepts, but an engineer needs to be talking about this. What could be done, just general estimations, the barge idea that we're talking about that constantly cleans, staff didn't like it. Well, let's find out why. I think it's a good idea. And so we need to talk these things out right now. While this is going on, this is the time to talk it out. And so I'll go talk to the city manager in about an hour here. I got a meeting anyway, and I'll bring it up because it's the time.
I wasn't here for this conversation, Scott, but you heard from somebody about Boyd Lake up in Colorado, and there was a sense that Boyd Lake up in Colorado, which I'm not familiar with, I guess it's near Fort Collins or north of Denver, has been overdeveloped. Is at the point now where it's just, and I can tell you the Fox River near where I live in Chicago, it's got to be 10% oil and gas by now because there's so much stuff that goes up and down it. So I know there are issues like that. But if I could ask of you before we move toward closing is do you have any particular lakes that you've been to, that you've seen, that you like the way people have in the area have developed them or maintained them, or is there an asset on them? And Texas is actually quite full of lakes east of here. So you've had a lot of palettes, a lot of canvases on which to paint the way humans interact with the body of water. Is there anything that sort of jumps off?
Lake McQueeney, constant level lake, well developed. They've done a great job.
Lake McQueeney, all right. And because I'd like to actually sort of do a little bit of a quick case study on a few of the ones that people do particularly like. Any other suggestions?
Conroe's not bad.
All right, I'm gonna repeat. First you said Lake McQueenie for the yeah, and Conroe, Texas. I'm familiar.
So the only other request I would make before we break until tomorrow night at 6 is, are there any other issues that you all think we need to consider that are contextual issues, that we're not necessarily under scope to specifically resolve, but you think there are issues that are related that we need to understand? Yes, sir.
Well, I'd say one more thing that I think is unique about Nasworthy. Gene's been around a long time. We built an amusement park out there in 1962 at Mary Lee Park. There's been an amusement park at the lake. So that idea doesn't work very well, does it? But we've got a unique deal out here, and that I don't know the exact numbers right now, Paul, but I think we're somewhere around $11.5 million in the Lake Nasworthy Trust Fund. There's a potential of maybe $20 million in the Lake Nasworthy Trust Fund, which is derived from the sale of the property at the lakes. Having that type of money available to do these master projects per se is a very unique situation. When we go to the taxpayer and we say we've got a potential here to build running courses, put in boat ramps, put in restrooms, clean up the lake, and guess what, taxpayers, it's not going to cost you a dime. It's just a matter of us selling them on the idea of that here's the money, you've already got it in an account, and we can use it to the betterment of that lake if we do it this way. And I would hate to see us take the money and put like $20 million in a hotel where the power plant is. I think you really got to look at this thing as an overall project where you benefit the runners, the boaters, the skiers, the hikers. Everybody gets a take on it. And if you do that, of course, to spend this money on these projects, we have to have voter approval.
Sure.
So the only way to do that, of course, is try to get everybody in the game, and not just one little group gets to benefit out of it.
No, I think it's a great point. I can tell you that we're not going to make any recommendations where what's a core proprietary interest that should be funded through private investment should be a candidate for any public funding through the trust fund. We agree with you. What we will do is help prioritize those public benefits that we think are sustainable and that will catalyze private investment that ultimately benefit more than just a single project. We totally agree with that.
Great.
And we're not going to make any recommendations that the public put all of their eggs in one basket that's dependent on the success or failure of a particular business. We think that would be inappropriate.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, we are 1 minute until 10 o'clock. Any other last minute comments or questions? We really appreciate you coming, and we'll see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. here. Thank you. Correct? 6 p.m. tomorrow? Yep. Thank you.